Dr. Jen Crenshaw here, coming back to you for another chat session as a part of our Managing Talent and Culture, Leadership, Engagement, and Performance. So, today we're going to be talking about a couple of books that made a huge impact on me when I was learning really what it means to shape a culture in an organization. Winning Teams, Winning Cultures by Larry Sen and Jim Hart. And then what I consider to be a companion book, which was put out by the Sendelany Consulting Group, The Human Operating System. So great reads. Can get them on Amazon. I think they're in fairly limited print. These are I don't know if they are still printing these books, but I'm sure you can find them. All right, so let's get going. Excited to go through this with you today. So, Sendelany, who are they and why did they write these books, right? So, they're, like I said, a leadership consulting group when that was just getting started, right? When consulting and organizational culture was first coming onto the scene. So in 1978, Larry Sen and Jim Delaney, who were two process improvement experts and professors from the University of Southern California, said we think that we can really help, and so they formulated this consulting group. They realized that the most common reason that process improvement didn't work in organizations was the what they first called was the organizational character, later renamed the organizational culture. And so Sendelany was the first and the only consulting firm with a specific and singular mission to shape the overall culture of organization to support better business results. And so, as process improvement professors, they kept having failed process improvements. And that's when they discovered, hey, there's something here. This organization seems to have taken on a character of its own. It's almost acting like an individual. And so, with that, they said, what can we do to shape this culture? And so, they really found that there were three levels where they could impact leadership so that they could transform the way process improvement would really flourish in their organizations. The individual leaders themselves, teams, and then the overall organizational culture. There were a lot of very, you probably heard, some of you may have been impacted by their work. And as we start talking about some of these human organizational systems, some things you might be like, hey, I've heard of that, as in, for example, the shadow of a leader, right? That's something that you hear often. They worked with large organizations like United Healthcare, and United Healthcare and Optum. You can still see the influence of these human organizational system concepts that were really became a part of developing that culture. Elevance Health, which formerly known as WellPoint, also organization I was a part of and could definitely see the footprint of this work in their culture. Limited Brands, Yum Brands, Burger King. Burger King is where I was exposed to Sendelany and the concepts. And that we formed our BK Our Way, and had the values of bold, empowered, accountable, and fun. And pretty much all of the work that I did in my 6 years at Burger King was really influenced by Sendelany and our BK Our Way culture. All right, so one of the most impactful concepts that came out of the Sendelany work is their belief that every organization has a definable culture. The only question is this: does the culture shape you, or do you shape the culture? And there are several cultural barriers. I'm going to show you the jaws of culture, and then we're going to go back to look at, because I know this slide is pretty small, right? But really, if you think about any initiative, any process improvement, whether it's a new strategy, a change initiative, a new IT system, a merger and acquisition, definitely lots of mergers and acquisitions in my time at Burger King. Franchise stores bought and sold. So whether it was between two different franchisees, whether it was a franchisee selling back to the corporation selling to a new franchisee, lots of merger and acquisitions there in that franchise world. New leaders, even, right? New structures. These initiatives or these change, right, go through these cultural barriers or the jaws of culture. And then what survives are those results. Let's go back and take a look here, right? So, what are some of the barriers to successful change? Internal competition between business units, right? Like turf issues, the we they attitudes that you can sometimes find, a lack of agility or ability to adapt quickly, hierarchical top down tendencies and boss driven leadership styles can be the jaws that eat culture and eat positive initiative. Bureaucratic tendencies and lack of innovation, right? I'm sure many of us see that. I know in our classes here together, we have a lot of folks who work in energy, and these historically can be slow moving bureaucratic organizations. I know that lots have changed over the last 10 years, but still often there's that kind of that undercurrent, that foundation of bureaucratic slow moving. Definitely we see that impact. Lack of accountability, excessive blaming, excuses, not my fault, right? Trust issues, conflict avoidance, sometimes being overly polite. But sometimes that also brings about passive aggressive behaviors, right? So, again, thinking about, right, you have this new initiative and it has to make its way through, right, these cultural barriers, these behaviors that maybe aren't um, friendly to that change. I mentioned just a second ago and very quickly this idea of shadow of a leader, right? And so one of the things that I have definitely come to learn, and it's something that I say often to the leaders that I work with, working in startup organizations, right? Building cultures, forming cultures, right? One of the reasons that I choose to work in startup is because I love forming cultures. I love having the opportunity to build a culture from scratch. And the way you build a culture, the way you form it is one interaction at a time, right? So, no matter what you say your values are, no matter what you aspire for your culture to be, how each individual interaction takes place, that really is your culture. And so that's why the shadow of a leader is so important. This idea of the shadow of the leader really came out of Larry Sen's doctoral work, right? Where, 35 plus years ago, he learned that organizations tend to take on the characteristic of their leaders. And, that really made me think of this quote by James Baldwin, right? Children have never been very good at listening to their elders, but they have never failed to imitate them, right? So we know that old saying, right? People don't listen to what you tell them to do, they follow your example, right? So do do as I say, not as I do, never works, right? Children, it doesn't work with children. It doesn't work with teams that you lead in an organization as well. And so when you think about your organization and you think about this concept of shadow of a leader, and I realize in this setting, these are rhetorical questions. Um, but you might have some assignments that you have will be working on for this class, and these are questions that you may want to think through that help you really formulate whether it be an engagement plan or a change plan. You may want to think about some of these questions, right? What's your leadership shadow? What shadow is the senior team in your organization casting? What's the good news and the bad news, right? Like, what are the good things about the shadow that gets cast? And what are those things that if you could change them, you would? What behaviors would you like to see change in a group that you lead? And once you know what those changes are, can you really think about the shadow that you're casting? And do you think that there's something about your leadership behaviors that may be causing or imposing even those changes that you'd really like to see? All right. So I am a Miami Dolphins fan. And I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, not because of Moreno, not even because of Tua, though I am a Tua fan currently. Think he's a pretty talented guy. I became a Miami Dolphins fan very specifically because of Don Shula. Don Shula wrote a book with Ken Blanchard. And as you were reviewing leadership theories, you would have come across the name Blanchard. And Don Shula and Ken Blanchard teamed up and they wrote Everyone's a Coach. And that book had a huge impact on me, and it led me to start really researching Don Shula, finding out who he was as a leader and what made him so successful. And one quote that I love from Coach Shula is, "When teamwork kicks in, nobody can beat you." And I love being a part of teams. Many times in the last 10 years of my career, I've considered striking out on my own and starting a consulting business. But I just love teamwork. I love being a part of a team. I really do believe in the together everyone achieves more idea of teamwork. And I think that's exactly what Don Shula is saying here. So, what are some signs of a high performing team? Do they make decisions unselfishly with the greater good of the organization? In the team that you're on now, right? Is the team seen by the organization as being aligned on goals and priorities? Does each team member assume the best intention of other team members? Do you openly discuss in meetings the real issues, making sure that it's not we're careful what we say in the meeting, and then when we go in the hallway, there's the meeting after the meeting, right? Never a good sign, and typically not the sign of a high performing team. When decisions are made in a senior team meeting, does everyone own the decision as their own, right? There should be plenty, like we were just saying, all of the dissent, all of the discussion, all of the ideas should happen very transparently in the room. But then once a decision is made, everybody links arms, and when they're out talking about it, they talk about it with a level of commitment and pride as if they had made the decision themselves. Even if during the meeting they had to bring up some dissenting opinions, right? Once those opinions get aired, then it's okay, this is what we've decided to do, and we're all going to march in the same direction. That's the sign of a high performing team. Do the leaders and each team member walk the talk of living the values, right? Once we determine what our values are going to be as a team, right, are we living them out? Recently, the CEO that I work with said, one of the things that he knows is true about having a really great culture is that you're very clear with the organization exactly what your values are. And then one by one, you live them out, right? And I couldn't agree with him more. And it's the reason why I keep choosing to work with him. Does everyone on the team fully participate in the initiatives, or is it, or this is really talking about the senior team mostly, right? Is the senior team fully on board and participating in the initiatives, or is it just a blessing? Go forth and be fruitful. Really important that everyone on the team sees the senior leaders as being somebody who really supports and is willing to get in, roll up their sleeves, and work toward the same goals. All right. I mentioned a few minutes ago the human operating system. I'm going to share with you a few concepts that come from the human operating system. All right. Human operating system principle 1. It is important that we manage our energy. It's the key to healthy high performance. You don't want to have angry, frustrated, stressed out people, right? Instead, you want energized, connected, challenged, hopeful folks. Well, what does that look like, right? So, love a 2x2. I think I mentioned that before. So, here's my 2x2 for this chat. If we're thinking about energy, right, we think about our physical energy, right? Making sure that we are rested and able to physically function. And then we think about our emotional energy, right? Our mental health, right? Our psychological, like this comes into play with that psychological safety, right? That we talked about in another chat. And so on this 2x2, right, you think about if there's negative physical energy, or if there's low physical energy and negative emotional energy, right? That's this exhausted, drained, defeated, right? If the physical energy is high and the emotional energy is just not there, right? Then it might actually be angry, frustrated, stressed, anxious, defensive, right? That's that I'm emoting, but I have the physical energy to tell you that I am emotionally not in this, right? Versus if my physical energy is low, but my emotional energy is high, right? I'm carefree, I'm peaceful, might be relaxed and happy. But where's that sweet spot, right? My physical energy's high, I'm rested, I'm giving it all that I've got, and I've got positive emotional energy. That's where you're going to see me connected, challenged, hopeful, and aligned, right? And so this helps us think about how do we manage this energy. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the ways to manage and some of the ways to think about that management in just a second. I'm going to share with you a second human operating principle, right? Our thinking drives our behaviors. And I'm about to show you the results cone. And I use the results cone all the time when I'm coaching leaders on how do you help to change behaviors. That's one of the hardest things to do, right? You have to start with changing how people think. And so here's the results cone, work straight from Sendelani's leadership consulting group in the early 2000s, 2006. They published this in the Winning Teams, Winning Cultures book. So when you think about our results, and you can apply this to the team's results, you can apply this to your individual results, right? If you want to change a result, to change that result, you have to change a behavior, right? It could be as simple as I want to change my goal is to go to the gym 3 times a week. Well, if I'm oversleeping and I'm not getting to the gym 3 times a week, right? Not getting to the gym is a result of my behavior, right? Which is oversleeping. Well, how did that happen, right? What's my thinking? I have to change my thinking about, do I need to set an alarm differently? Do I need to go to bed earlier? What is my thinking that leads into what is my set of beliefs that leads into my thinking, right? Do I believe that it's important to get a set amount of sleep? And if that's the case, do I believe that I could go to bed earlier, still get the same amount of sleep, still be up on time, still make it to the gym 3 days a week, right? What is my thinking that leads into my behaviors that leads into my results? And this is true for an organization, right? What do we think about who we are, what we can do, what we can accomplish? How does that lead into the behaviors of the team and then ultimately into our results? This results cone, I think, is just a really powerful tool. All right, human operating system principle 3. Our state of mind or our quality of thinking determines our effectiveness and quality of life. Maybe some of you have experienced the mood elevator. I love the mood elevator, right? Because it's a quick tool that we can use for ourselves, right? To assess, where are we on this mood elevator? And how is that going to affect our functioning that day, our thinking that day? What is the quality of our thinking, right? If I'm judgmental and blaming, you'll see that in the red, right? Down about midway in the red. Judgmental and blaming, right? That's where I am on the mood elevator. That's going to be the quality of my thinking. Probably not the best time to address a colleague and share with them that I have a dissenting opinion on something on work that we share together, right? Probably going to wait until I can get myself in, at the very least, a hopeful and optimistic place. Really, the pinnacle of this mood elevator is to stay grateful, right? Wise, insightful. But, at the very least, can we stay kind of right at curious and interested, right? So even if I am having a bad day, right? Even if the quality of my thinking left to my natural devices is worried and anxious, can I at least make a decision that I'm going to remain curious? I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I'm going to show a level of interest, right? So that if I go back and think about the mood elevator, the results cone, right? If I stay curious, how might that impact my thinking, which will then impact my behavior, which will then impact my results, right? If I stay curious, impacts my thinking, impacts my behavior, impacts my results. Okay. All right. And the fourth principle of the human operating system, we each see the world through our own unique filters. Now, a little challenging in this particular environment here, doing this on video and not having your immediate feedback, but I'm about to flash a picture. And I want you to look at it and I want you to think about what you see. Maybe jot a note to yourself, right? What do you see in this picture? Just giving you a second to take a look at it. All right. Do any of you see a man? Right? You see his nose, his ear, a little bit of hair. Almost looks like maybe he's bald, but you see the top of his head. So maybe not. He could have, we see his hairline there, right? He could have some hair on top. We just not in the picture, right? Did any of you see a woman holding a baby? Right? If you saw the man and you saw his nose, but you don't see the woman holding the baby, the nose is the woman's hair. The man's ear is the baby. The man's chin is the woman's elbow. Is there a new picture coming into play for you? Right? If you saw the woman, but you didn't see the man, right? Kind of in reverse, right? Look at that woman. See her hair? That's the nose. See her pointed elbow toward the bottom? That's the man's chin, right? All right. So, depending on our perspectives, right? Depending on our filters, we each see the world through our own unique filters. It's really important to remember that you have a different filter than other people, right? And again, going back to stay curious, be interested, right? Rather than lock in, hey, I see a man, right? Really stay curious, stay open, ask questions, be interested, see if you can find the woman and the baby, right? All right. Well, I hope that this little book review has you thinking about some ways that just some practical tools that you can use to impact the culture of your team that you serve on, and then ultimately to impact the overall culture of the organization. Because I truly do believe that either the culture shapes you or you shape the culture. And I believe you have a choice as to which that is. Dave Novak was a well-known chairman, president, and CEO of Yum Brands. And the Cindy leadership processes and concepts were an important part of the Yum Brands culture building, right? And so David Novak said, the Cindy leadership process and concepts were invaluable. They brought out the best in people and improved customer service, sales, and bottom line results. This was Yum Brands. For those of you maybe who don't remember, we're talking Pizza Hut, KFC. Again, we use this at Burger King, and we just saw a real impact on how customer service evolved when we use these concepts. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the video today, and I hope you enjoyed a little bit about this, and I hope you'll consider using some of these concepts in the work you do in this class.